All right, so everyone, thank you very much for joining today on this kind of special .NET Conf 2023 event. So, as we all know, .NET now is quite amazing. You can build pretty much any kind of applications for any operating system. There's a lot of tooling available, although we mostly prefer Visual Studio still, but there's a lot of choice, so that's great. See someone joining. So, and it's get better and better every time. .NET 8 has been released in .NET Conf in November. These are some of the stats that Microsoft shared about usage. More than 6 million developers actively using it monthly. That's quite amazing. 53,000 community members contributed to .NET. .NET continues to be like the most admired framework on Stack Overflow year on year. And there's also in the top 5 highest velocity open source project, and C# is consistently in the top 5 programming languages on GitHub and more. Looking at the TLB index, C# is still growing a lot. We're all waiting for the time when it's going to overtake Java. It's not happened yet in many years now, but I'm looking forward to that day. But as you can see, it's the only language that's actually growing as much as a lot, while most of the top 4 are kind of not. So it's going to grow and grow. So I'm very excited about C# and this keep getting better and better. And I will start from the news about C# from the conference. So just the top key features that have been announced and the most useful, I believe. So one is the collection expressions. Basically, you can now represent a collection with just square brackets when you initialize them and when you pass them to methods and so on. It's a lot more simpler, and it's effectively what's available in other languages already. Like Python, it makes sense. I'm glad they finally did it. It makes the code looks better, and my team already used them, and yeah, makes the code more readable. We also added the spread operator that apparently captured the interest of JavaScript developers on LinkedIn. When I did the post, I was very surprised when how much comments there were on that post. But yeah, it's totally fine. Languages can copy from each other's, and they copy the best part. So the spread operator, yeah, also allows you to basically spread all the content of a collection into another in a very simple way. We're just using two dots, similar to what you use for creating ranges. That's also consistent with the other part of the language. So yeah, it's very small feature, but quite useful. Has a lot of C# features lately. They have been added to improve like the expressiveness of the language. That's always been one of the key design principles of C#, and it's one of the reasons why we like it. Another things is primary constructors that are now available in classes and structs. So with C# 9, Microsoft added the primary constructor and records in the language, and now they're also available in classes and structs. I think they're mostly useful when you want to inject dependencies in a class, and instead of actually saving that into a field and then reusing it, you can just add the constructor parameters directly after the class name. Kind of makes sense. You can just use them directly in any portion of the class, and you just remove some boilerplate code. Any constructor that you had will need to call that primary constructor. Instead of a difference with records is that obviously the language will not create like automatically properties for you. Like for records it does, because it's a lot more opinionated. In records will automatically be having all the equality members and so on, value type semantics, but with classes you can do whatever you want. So the compiler is only auto-generating the constructor for you. But you can also create properties, assign the constructor parameters to it as you would normally do, and still save some lines of code. I think my team did use primary constructors. There is a very simple way in Visual Studio that you can do in bulk across all your solution, and you can easily save thousands of lines of code very, very quickly. So I always like deleting code. So yeah, that's also a very nice feature that kind of brings parity with records for primary constructors. So and you can use them with structs as well. In terms of other things that capture my attention for .NET is the ability to configure the putting all the build output into a single folders. So you always had this annoying bin obj folders all around the file system for every single project. So now you can just centralize them all into a single place. And they kind of simplified a little bit the hierarchy of how the build output is created to no more than 3 levels down. So I think this is nice things I would probably encourage you to do in your solutions. And they also added like a foundational certification that is free, very, very basic, but is a nice to have. So if you want to take a look at that, or recommend it to anyone that is more junior level, that's definitely a nice addition from Microsoft with FreeCode Camp. Okay, getting to Blazor. That's what makes Rui happy. Yeah, Blazor, I think, has been one of the best our key announcements from the conference, in particular, the addition of a new rendering mode, that is the static server-side rendering. So effectively now that's the default in Blazor. So you don't need to use a WebSocket or WebAssembly at all. If you want to use Blazor, you can just use the normal kind of fetch API and do server-side rendering directly with Blazor. And it opened up some interesting possibilities because you don't have to choose anymore which rendering mode. You can start with one and then you can combine and take advantage of multiple modes, and it gives a lot of flexibility. So for example, you can have, so up until now you had to choose if you either wanted to have server side or you wanted to have client side. Now you can, mix and match. You can have a portion of the website to be WebAssembly, a portion to be server side, and you can decide how much interactivity you want in which particular portion of the website. They call it page component interactivity. And yeah, I think that's opened up quite interesting possibilities. And another cool stuff is the auto mode. So one of the problem with Blazor's, at least WebAssembly, has been downloading the runtime. That obviously takes time and is as a cost for the first time you access the website. So Microsoft with the auto mode allows you to basically use the server in order to cache the WebAssembly files, and then later on use the WebAssembly at an SVC. So basically you save, you don't need to wait too much until you see the website rendered the first time you access it, because you will not use WebAssembly at the beginning. That's also quite a nice addition. And in fact, they actually eliminated all the other templates. They have a single template for Blazor where you can use the rendering mode that you need anytime you need. So it's just a lot simpler, the story now. So let me invite Adrian in. Yeah. And of course, they always improve performance. They did a lot more improvements in terms of performance for WebAssembly and UI rendering in general. They added quick read, authentication, and the identity components APIs to make it easier to start with those things. Auto reload improvements, and so on. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff in coming up in Blazor. So it's making all this more competitive. And you can also add Blazor on top of kind of React application or Angular application if you want to gradually move away from other technologies, but in a more incremental way. I haven't tried it out myself, but it's nice to see that they start to think about this potential story about migrating from other front ends. But I don't know if anyone has any experience to share about Blazor before I move on to the next steps. How people feel about it. I know, Rui.
I'm a very suspected guy to say it, but I think it's amazing. And one important thing to mention is to demystify it. I think that for some people, it's that it does not break the apps built with Blazor prior to .NET 8, because you can still use the global interactivity modes, either WebAssembly or server, for the whole app as you used to. But now you can use a new mode and have per component or per page interactivity, but it does not break the old way of doing things.
That's a
And I
good
think
point.
it's important,
Yeah.
to mention that for some people that they think it will happen.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good point. Yeah, Mike's always try to avoid breaking compatibility in general. So
Yeah,
they,
yeah.
they did it in this case as well.
I think it's a very good effort from Microsoft, because you have software for Windows that it was developed with technologies, very old technologies, and still work to this day on Windows 11 or 10. So it's a thing that Microsoft always cared about.
Yep, absolutely. Awesome. Then the other side of the coin is obviously Blazor can not just be used for website, but also can be used for applications, native applications. So you can use an hybrid. You can build an hybrid app that basically leverages .NET MAUI, but you use Blazor as a kind of front end. So you can basically use web technologies with C# to build a desktop application. But also you can go fully native and just use C# and XAML to build the desktop app. So you have a lot of flexibility now, based on what kind of skills you have or you prefer, technology you prefer. So there's a lot of possibilities. The hybrid apps is effectively Blazor Web View that hosts Blazor, and you can interact with the native. Is fully native. You just use the Blazor as a technology to build the hybrid app, but doesn't require any internet. It's just a standalone app, and can target Windows, Mac, and also mobile devices. So you can do a lot, not just web with Blazor. So if you go to the fully native things, they also created this hybrid web view. If you want to host like React, for example, inside of an MAUI application, this is just preview. I think they're looking for feedback, but they are trying to add more and more possibilities of combining the text to simplify transitioning, into the new tech, or adding some more like interoperability experiences between JavaScript.NET and other kind of frameworks built with JavaScript. So yeah, it's quite cool how much they're doing. So in addition to that, if you want, you can also build markup directly in C#. So if you really don't want to use XAML, but you need to use a native technology without Blazor, you can develop the UI all in C#, just using a Fluent API. It's quite nice. It's supported by all .NET MAUI apps, and Platform 5 also support that now. They did just a blog post about that. So there are some people that like C# so much they want to use it as much as possible, including instead of XAML. So some people are here probably like C# too. So it's very good to see all of these things coming along. Then obviously the whole ASP.NET Core is improved in addition to Blazor. Lots of security and APIs addition they've made, plus also changes in the runtime, supporting HP3. A lot of AOT work to improve this, the size of the applications, and in general improving performance. Lots of work happened there. I'm not going to go into too much details. And .NET 8 can be used in Azure from day zero, basically since they announced the app service, Azure Functions, static web apps, all support .NET 8. Excuse me. In terms of performance, they kind of improve performance across the board. JSON serialization much faster in general. Every Microsoft is starting to get in the habit of improving performance a lot every release. So it's quite amazing. So as soon as you are upgraded on an 8, you immediately get at least 15% improvement in performance across the board. They also made a lot of work to try to reduce the sizes of applications, mostly because of trying to make them more cloud friendly. So you're probably familiar with the minimal API, allows you to create like web API very easily. And now they added a create empty builder method that allows you to create a web app almost without any ASP.NET Core dependencies, just the minimum things, the orchestra, very core orchestral web server, and you just get an application to just 15 megabytes to do the very basic, and you can add on top of that instead of starting from a larger web application that you used to have. So yeah, they will basically provide more possibilities of building very small applications, and also very nice to see. And that also to makes containers smaller. So they in particular did a lot of work on ahead of time compilations, so building some of the .NET containers ahead of time compiled that you can easily publish with .NET SDK and so on. So I'll show some data that they've shared. They call this the Chisled. Don't know how to pronounce that, but yeah, they made some container size improvements that are quite drastic in the amount of megabytes that each container is. So it's quite impressive how small they are getting. So if you didn't come across to AOT is basically compiling C# into IL at build, and then when you publish, it's compiled in platform code. So you need to publish for each operating system. So there is not just in-time, there's not just JIT in it, but it's still, as a runtime and garbage collection, it's still managed application. It's just that is streamed and targeting specifically the operating system. So it's trying to really minimize as much as possible the extra code inside the application. So there are pros and cons, but they obviously work a lot on AOTs. To the point that like the size on Linux and Windows are fairly small, so they did a lot of improvements in the size of the applications. And on top of the kind of performance and memory improvements, they added a lot of services to help building high scalable and highly available applications. A lot of resiliency API, telemetry, and stuff like that. And to the point that instead of just adding just APIs that makes things even more complex, they decided to try to build a opinionated framework to build distributed applications called .NET Aspire. I think for me that's what was one of the biggest news of .NET Conf. So one of the common problems of building microservice application that I believe you should try to avoid as much as possible unless you really need it. But if you need it, it's still quite complicated to build them, to configure all the various services, get them to connect to talk to each other, find discoverability and stuff like that. And also tracing and metrics is quite complicated. It requires a lot of expertise, and it takes a lot of time. So what Microsoft wanted to do was to build a framework to build microservice application in a .NET-friendly way, in a very easy way, with all the defaults already in place, and making very easy to discover services and configure them. So that's .NET Aspire. So basically, what you're going to be able to do is you have a solution with a lot of projects. Each of them is like a service, and you can configure the kind of the discoverability in using C#, kind of a fluent API. You can say, for example, you have the basket API, depends on Redis, depends on RabbitMQ, and you can reference services by name without worrying about URLs, connection strings, and stuff like that. The framework kind of abstracting all that away, but you still have control of all of the things. It's just that it's a lot easier to get started. So you can build a lot of services, connect them together, super easy to start. And you can even press F5 and automatically run all the microservice application locally. You can see all the services running. You can see the traces. You can see the metrics. It's just doing a lot of stuff by default. You can all customize that. It's all code. It's automatically generated in a separate project that you can configure. But it's quite amazing. You just create that, and you can press F5. You can debug from Visual Studio any of those services, put a breakpoint. You can trace everything that's happening. Those could be just normal executables, or could be just container that has been started. So you can actually do a lot of stuff. It doesn't need to be .NET. It could be any languages. Just help to create microservice application in a much easier way. It's quite cool. I didn't quite play with it yet, but also if you're interested, there's in more in-depth video that we can watch together. But yeah, it's quite amazing. You can also publish it obviously to any Azure kind of container app service, or you can deploy that to Kubernetes. I think there is a way to kind of export the configuration into a manifest that can be easily converted into the other targets. Don't know all the details, but it's quite impressive. There's a repository that's available. You can see how it's been developed. So they try to kind of use the same model that ASP.NET Core uses. It's very easy, flexible, extensible, and in order to configure out how microservices communicate. So they kind of use the same pattern and apply to this. Before this project, there was another project that the Microsoft did, was the project TIE. So they spent a few years to be able to get to this stage, learning from all the experience of building microservices internally and from customers. So there was a lot of research on this, and yeah, that's quite cool. I think this is one of the top news of the conference. And obviously AI, we can't not talk about AI these days. So obviously Microsoft provide SDKs to connect to common the Azure OpenAI service, Azure Cognitive Search, and particularly interesting is the semantic kernel framework that is kind of allows you to use large language models and provide some additional services on top in a very easy way. It's an open source project. Yeah, basically I have some code to show on how this works. So you basically, you can integrate multiple large language models in C# and chain them together easily. And it's quite extensible. You can create your own plugins as well. So you basically create a kernel builder. You can configure to connect with Azure OpenAI, specifying what kind of model you want and what are your credentials. And then you can create your prompts, use the create semantic function to create kind of an AI service. And then you can run a sync, specify the input text, pass the various services you want, and we'll actually run the various large language models and get the output for you. So you can easily use C# to just get advantage of all the AI services available. And there's a lot more stuff. You can use memory and stuff, but that's kind of the basics. It's called semantic kernel. And yeah, you can find it on GitHub and play with it if you want to. But yeah, obviously Microsoft is making .NET more AI friendly and make it easy for C# developers to integrate AI into their applications. So it's quite interesting as well. Other things they made is metrics. As I said, improve the metrics. They're also supporting more like open telemetry. They added this iMeter factory interface that allows you to raise events and so on. That's kind of, I think, is probably used by .NET Aspire as well. It's very easy to use. You just inject it as you would normally do with an iLogger, and you can actually create events, meters in open telemetry and so on. I haven't played with that, but that's something they've done as well. In terms of tooling, Visual Studio Code is getting a lot more powerful, at least for C#. The C# Dev Kit extension, the IntelliCode for C# Dev Kit. They also have a plugin for .NET MAUI, so you can use Visual Studio for a lot more workflows in addition to Visual Studio. Visual Studio also have a Explorer to actually explore HTTP endpoints and so on. So that also can be useful instead of using an external tool. Microsoft also have this Azure Migrate Assistant. If you want to move your app into the cloud, you can run your app through this tool. It's a Visual Studio extension or a .NET CLI. Basically analyze all your app and see what kind of dependencies you have that are not compatible with the cloud. If you touch, something that only works locally and so on, and they provide you like ways that you can gradually move towards the cloud. So any tools like that can help you the transition. I have to mention this because it captured my attention. Like even Windows Form is getting some love. If you can now do stuff that you are able to do in WPF in Windows Form, like using view model patterns in Windows Form. Surprisingly, there's still a lot of people using Windows Forms. I still believe is quite productive to build like rapid prototypes, and they made it a lot more kind of a lot of style improvements, and also more easy to develop and test as well. So they're still working. I think is now a community project, but is still loved. People are improving Windows Forms. Unfortunately, it's only Windows, so that's the main downside, I guess.